Hello everyone, and welcome to the newly minted city of Athelberg. Where the farmland's rich, the rain is soft, and the trains run precisely on time. It's this Yankees' first attempt to recreate the magic of an old European city here in City Skylines 2. And today, we're bulldozing half of it and starting anew based on your feedback. Let's begin. I'm recording this before everyone's had a chance to vote on the new city name, so you're going to see TBD here for a little bit longer. For today's episode, though, a few things. One, I'm starting out pause because we're very close to level 5. And I want to talk a little bit about the start of the city based on some feedback from episode 1, and I just don't want it to level up right in the middle of that. 2, as you can probably tell, I'm getting over a cold, so apologies for sounding like Darth Vader. And 3, I was originally going to tackle our huge unemployment crisis, which is at 42.7%. And as people pointed out, we got 1,200 jobs for a city of almost 4,000, so no duh. And we might do a band-aid solution to start, like an industrial district over by our eventual harbor. But the bulk of today is addressing some of the most prominent feedback from episode 1, which was that we definitely need an old city center with pedestrian streets, a church, and a town square. And unfortunately, I did not leave myself a lot of room for that with this road setup, which, as people also pointed out, doesn't really look European. It looks like an American's idea of a European grid. You don't really have curvy streets like this. I mean, you have some, but if you take a look at Google Earth of Paris and Berlin, it's a lot of straight roads that just go off at different angles, not this curvy, wavy grid here. So I'm thinking we need to take a mulligan and rethink this. So what I have in mind is something like the Ile de Cité in Paris, which is the island along the Seine, which houses the Notre Dame, but it's also the OG Paris from what I'm reading. And I want to do something like that here. I'm going to take a branch of this river, bring it along here, pretty much demolish most of these roads in there, and then that island is going to be our original city. Historically, I think that makes sense because, it's very defensible. It's got these natural moats, and we'll raise the terrain a little bit on this end to make it seem like maybe there's a granite boulder underneath, and that's why the river branched off instead of just eroding right through it. But on top of that hill is where our church and courtyard will be. And then to justify still having this lake around when you have 2 streams of flowing water, I'm going to take a page out of the original map. And I'm not sure why I deleted this, but Teddy Radko and Poplar Ponderosa had this brilliant idea of placing an old mill along the stream here. And if we place it right here, this looks like a dam. Used to power the mill, but it created this backup of water, which we can also say is like, secondary reservoir in case of droughts, or just like recreational swimming. But I think that looks so cool, and we get some pedestrian paths going across, justify keeping this thing around. So that is the plan, and hopefully this turns out alright, but if not, we know what episode 3 is about. I'm going to move the health clinic though, so we don't have to buy a new one. Let's just plop this over here for now. Cool, 15k. And now I'm going to take a sledgehammer to basically this entire chunk of the grid. Alright, giving myself plenty of room to work with. So let's go to the level terrain tool now. And we'll start by this roundabout, I think. Bring this way down. And let's do 20. Let's grab, this elevation. And yeah, let's just trace it along here. Crossing underneath Moore Street, which I gotta rename. Thought I renamed that. And then coming back into this river by our French elementary school. And then, like I said, let's raise up this part of the island, and this is where our church and courtyard will go. Nothing too crazy though, so let's bring this way down. This is at 53 meters, let's just go 7-ish meters above it. That should be good. Nice. Okay, so let's bring this road, Kent Street, along the canal, and then we'll get 2 major crossroads, which you'll see in Paris and Berlin, roads going perpendicular to the length of the island. But then we'll plop down our buildings and then do the rest of the pedestrian streets. So let's begin by getting a 2-lane road coming off from this angle here, just following the canal. We'll turn those into bridge segments later, but let's do these 2 perpendicular ones. And I'm going to continue this road on this side of the lake and then bridge right around here. Okay, those are the main bridges for now, so let's move on to the actual assets in the Old City Island itself. And I've decided not to use the Notre Dame Cathedral just because it feels a little too grandiose for our small city at this point, and it's just friggin' expensive. So instead, a little nod to Dewey Del Mar, we're going to do the same custom church that we did way back when, like episode 15, when we did the small European village. Feels like a little more fitting and humble for our small city. So let's go to find it, and we're going to start with the crematorium garage. Alright, like that, and then next step, we're going to get the mausoleum. This guy right here, get it in front as the facade. We'll have the triangle, I think it's called the awning, is that correct? But we'll have that poking through just a little bit. Nice. And then what's really cool is the Notre Dame Cathedral actually came with these little roof decorations. So we can get these, these little iron railings right along the top here. Okay, pretty cool. And last thing for the church bell, we're going to use a chimney. And it's already the right color. Perfect. So the next thing our little island city needs is a pub, of course. And let's place it over here. This needs to be actually not Holly Street, but Holy Street. Dumb. But let's get the Irish Heath pub. Not the Irish, the UK Heath pub. Which is, let's do, not the big one, but yeah, with the lounge, facing the water, I think. So we'll have it kind of like this. And the pedestrian road that's going to line the island will be in the back. Hey, look at that, milestone 5. So I think this gives us, mixed use. That's going to be clutch. And then in terms of services, I think it's, mailbox and Wi-Fi, which we don't really need yet. We'll think about that later. But in old European fashion, let's get a road that just connects the 2 most important parts of the city. And for these roads, I'm going to go with the one-way narrow pedestrian street. This is vanilla, or not vanilla, but it's not from Road Builder, so we know it'll definitely work and it allows traffic. The one-way only applies to cars, not foot traffic, so I'm okay if this is one way. The only thing is this regular pedestrian street is way too wide, I think, so this one is a little more clean. We'll have the courtyard right in front. Actually, let's do the courtyard first so we know where this road's coming off from. All right, there we go. Let's connect them up. Beautimous, and I'll go through and make sure the one-way directions kind of all make sense, but we're going to cover everything with some nice cobblestone or tile surface for sure. But let's just go through now, surround the island with more pedestrian streets, and get a few blocks going. Alright, so we got the makings of our new city center with all these pedestrian roads. Tried to be sensible with the directions. It's basically a giant loop with alternating directions back and forth, going crossways. But again, only service vehicles, and I guess residential vehicles, will follow that. pedestrians can go either direction, so I'm not too worried about it. But historically, I think this makes a lot more sense than the curviness we had before, because think about it, if you're going to the pub after church, you're not going to wind back and forth. You're making a beeline for it. So it makes sense that Lavender Street would be straight from the courtyard to the pub, and then only when there's something in the way would the road go off at a different angle. But obviously a little bit of cleanup to do, and I'm gonna reorient some of these alleyways as well, so they continue the road patterns we established here, just so we have a more consistent style, but left a little park up there. The only thing I wanna do before that though, is I think we need a little more space for our church courtyard in our town square. Even though it's early beginnings, and so we don't have a lot of money to build a grand church, and remember, the only actual church assets we have in the game are the graveyard and the Notre Dame, so we gotta do something custom. But I still think we can give ourselves a little more space. So let's bring back these roads. I'm gonna drag the church back, and then we can have a bigger courtyard. Okay, and it's fine if this clips into the sidewalk a little bit, because again, we're gonna cover this all with some nice tile surface. Although, did I mess the terrain up? Oh no, looks pretty flat. And again, this road we're gonna cover with surface, so not gonna worry about that for now. Instead, let's redo some of these alleyways. Gonna delete a whole bunch of houses again, and unfortunately our little custom plaza out there. But it's for a good cause, so let's give this a shot. Alright, well, Founders Park lives on bigger and better than before with a stone gazebo now and some hot dog stands nested inside our revamped alleyway system, so a lot more angular and straight streets. Again, as someone pointed out, it was all about the shortest distance walking from A to B, so I think historically these make more sense, and now it's a little more consistent with what we have over on the island. But I went with a road builder variety of these alleyways with a narrow sidewalk, and the width of that sidewalk definitely tracks with some of the roads I saw in Paris, which has some ridiculously narrow sidewalks, so that's actually pretty realistic. And I went with some of the new mixed-use German and French assets that we got at level 5 along Prospect Street here. And these are definitely some shops I would want to visit, but I think we need a better name for the roads going by the canal. So let's call this Canal Street. And since we got 2 of them, this would be the south and north side. So let's call this Canal Street, south, and this one is Canal Street North. So before we move on and start filling out the old city center, let's move back our French clinic, and let's get it right in here, I think. And how much is this gonna cost me? 14,000, great. At least we got some cash from leveling up. And then I'll just fill in the gaps here with some more German townhouses. I'm not going to worry too much about the splicing here since, we can only do so much, but I think from afar that looks pretty good. Obviously, we'll fill in the surfaces again when you do a little bit of detailing. And I swear I had renamed Moore Street here, but someone pointed out that main streets in the UK are actually called High Street, so let's call this High Street. amazing feedback from episode 1. So again, thank you everyone. So we got a lot of cleanup to do around the edges here, and then I'll want to get a few more signature buildings in the old city center, make it feel really special. But very quickly, let's make this side of Canal Street North all key walls. We're going to expand the canal on this side and then make sure that all these trees are gone if they're in the water. Okay, I promise we will hit play soon and see all this come to fruition, but speaking of the canals, let's get that mill back, and I think let's cross right here. So we're going to go to find it, and it's called, oh, I already got it, nice, Old Mill Ruins. So let's have it, I'm going to do a little bit of terraforming work, but let's have this come off right along here. I'm going to use Move It to bring it up so those staircases appear above, yep, the pavement just like that. And so let's bring the land back a little bit here, and then we're going to use an invisible pedestrian path so people will actually be crossing this bridge right here. Okay, pretty cool. So yeah, we're going to go to our Pathways tab, invisible pedestrian path. Here we go. Let's have it go through the building. I guess, can we make this go up the stairs too? I think so. Sweet. Through the building, across the bridge, and then from here, we're going to connect to a regular path. You can see it makes that weird connection, but don't worry, we'll cover all this with a nice surface. Yeah, paving slab gray A. Oh, it's looking pretty cool, if you ignore the fact that it's floating slightly above the water, but from here, you can't really tell. And I'm flabbergasted that we got the same color fence on both sides on the first try, which if you've seen past videos, you know that never happens, so I'm gonna call that a win. But now that we have the old mill, the church, which also needs a good name, and the Heath pub, I'm gonna spend some time getting some more special spots throughout the downtown or the old city center. As a few people have said, everything in like an old European city has history, literally hundreds of years old, and I want to stay true to that. So, without much further ado, let me introduce the Red Goose, storefront for the oldest winemakers in the city. High Street Theater, where traveling actor guilds have played since the late 1500s. The Crooked Spoon, a minuscule cafe serving the best chamomile tea. The Painter's Steps, a narrow stairway tucked behind the church with all the oldest art galleries. The Ferryman's Nook, local cafe where all the dock workers go after their shifts. Zermühl, the old German beer hall by the mill. A Makindi, or the Black Pig, Welsh competitor to the Heath pub down the street. Baba's Table, a laid-back Slavic restaurant. Maison Bellerive, a charming but expensive bed and breakfast along the canal. The Olive and Fig, a popular Mediterranean bistro. And St. Marina's Fork, home to the old St. Marina's Hotel and St. Marina's Park. That was a little cheesy, perhaps, but it's always fun to make backstories for the more important spots in your city, especially like an old city center where everything has history, including the street name, so I was a little more careful this time. We have Rue de la Guerre since it goes all the way down to the train station, Cobbler Street and Threadmaker's Lane for the types of businesses that are housed there, Mill Street going down to the mill here, Old Boatman's Road going around our lake into the ocean, and then St. Marina's Drive, named for St. Marina's Fork area, named after the fork of the river here. And most important, we have Middlebridge, since it's in between these two bridges, and I was losing creative juice at that point. But this park, the St. Marina's Fork, I modeled this after Platzspitz Park in Zurich, which I was only there for a layover, so I only got a few hours in the city, but I was blown away by how beautiful it is. And Zurich actually has an island in the center of its city, kind of like this one right here, with a park at the very tip and a big museum right behind it that kind of splits the river in two. So I absolutely loved it. It was beautiful. I definitely wanted to get a taste of that somewhere in here. Now, good thing I kept the game paused until now because we all of a sudden have another power bottleneck, and I think I know an easy way to solve this. Let's just move our wind turbines over to the windy area of the map, because that is a lot cheaper than actually plopping down new ones. So I'm gonna select both of these and move them over to our existing one down here where we can get, 5 megawatts, perfect. And then we can connect them to this existing power line here. And obviously these farms are gonna go. And if we hit play again, those should be all hooked up. There we go. And we are, and there we go, back in the green. Okay, in fact, maybe we can lower our budget just a smidge to save some money. Let's go down to 90% and get rid of these underground lines we left behind. Now, speaking of Zurich, I'm taking a look at Google Earth once again, and they have this awesome canal that kind of cleaves the central island in two. And I'm not going to even try to pronounce this, but I guess for y'all's sake, it's Am Schatzengraben, I think. But what I'm noticing is that they have it in straight kinked segments, kind of like all of our roads here, whereas our canal is way too curvy, kind of the original sin. So let's go through and just make these roads a little straighter. Okay, I think that's looking a little more like it, and this should look better once the water fills up the canal, but it is taking its sweet, sweet time. We might have to plop down another water source there. But I did continue Canal Street South a little bit farther so it didn't just end at the bridge there, and added a few more restaurant props to make this place feel a little more lively and take advantage of the awesome walkability. And speaking of walkability, got a few good suggestions for our church area. One was to have a pedestrian bridge across the canal here to ease access from this side over to the church. So what we're going to do is get the arched bridge pathway right here and make a connection, I think, right where that crosswalk begins. Now this is going to mess up the node like that, but that is okay. We can do a little bit of cleanup because next thing I want to do is turn this into a pedestrian only street. This was such an American move to put parking right in front of such a historic site. So instead of parking alleyway, let's go to, full pedestrian street. This side is a key wall, so let's force it to go to ground. There you go. We can leave the surface like that, I think, but gotta do a little bit of move it magic to get this connection back in place. And that looks a little weird, but I think we can hide it with one more tree and then get rid of this extra crosswalk. And then let's name this after a suggestion from a commenter, Middelveen, the Holy Trinity Church. And this should be Trinity Road. But yeah, while we're in the area, I also want to convert all these small alleyways into pedestrian streets like we have in the old city. Down with the automobile. Now before we move on to complete the rest of our city center here and finally get that town square, I think it's time we create some districts and assign city services. Since we did uproot about 500 people when we demolished this part of the city, and as you can see, people are complaining. So for these district names, I think some of them will speak for themselves. So we'll have like Central Station here, the Old City. I think since we got Trinity Church and Trinity Road here, this should just be called Trinity. But for the remainder, I'm going to use city name suggestions from last episode's comment thread for names that did not make the final cut, the final poll, just so we have them in here somewhere with the lore. Starting over here on the coast, since it's got these glittering views of the ocean, from Call Me Infinite 0000, we're going to call this the Diamond Coast. And if you haven't read Call Me Infinite 0000, which is a mouthful, if you haven't read their comments before, they are like the lore master of city backgrounds, so they're great. The port area, I think, is going to speak for itself as well. Let's just call this the old port for now, since it is the original port. And we'll include this little triangle block because someone suggested that this could be like a customs building by the port. And maybe once we extend the port on this side of the canal, we'll move that so it's like right front and center. As we said, there's going to be Central Station and Trinity. And we'll use High Street as the dividing line, I think. We definitely need to get like a pedestrian bridge going over these tracks as well. On this side of Hillside Road, let's do 2 districts. The first one from Miss_Savage. We're going to call this Brightshire. And let's get these industrial buildings, which will definitely go at some point. I think this should be like a vineyard place instead since it's up on a hill. But Brightshire just sounds delightful. And then over here, let's call this industrial district Dewkirk. And this is from Sesto Elemento. Wingardium Leviosa. And I believe our outside connection is called like Crewkirk or something like that. Where's our train line? Crewkern. Close. All right. Nice. Along the canal here on this side, since we have these row houses still, and we'll probably get more row houses on this side, but let's call this New Amsterdam. And this is from _Mike628. We'll go all along Old Boatsman Road, or Boatman's Road. And we'll go up here. I'm probably going to move these train track backs a little bit so we can get zoning on this side of the street as well. And of course, this will be the Old City. And we're going to go up to St. Marina's Drive because this area is going to be called St. Marina's Fork, as we said. And St. Marina is the patron saint of water, by the way. So since it's, forking in the river there, hence the name, there you go. I'm going to stop speaking now. And let's actually include all these farmlands as well. On this side of the canal, we have 3 district names. The first one, all the way from Elm Street to, let's go to Old Boatman's Road to St. Marina Drive. Let's call this Granbach, which this is from Nico FHC. And they say it's French and German for Big Creek. So since it's facing the creek, I figured that was pretty apt. On this side of Old Boatman's Road, though, this is going to be Zeeberdam from Michaels Churko 4748, who said Z is Dutch for sea and Boer is Dutch for farm. So since we got the canal leading to the sea and farmland out here, figured that was a good fit. And we'll go up to this farm, I think. And for now, let's just include this farm in Granbach. And did I actually fact check any of these translations? Absolutely not. But there you go. Let's finally assign some services. And up our police and healthcare budget while we're at it, because if we take a look at happiness, if this shows, there you are. Unreliable healthcare and high crime risks are the biggest detriments to the city right now. And that's because their budgets are slashed in half. Well, yeah, we'll do 90 for both, I think. And we're still in the green. Excellent. So with our districts in place and services assigned, with increased budgets hopefully coming soon, let's finally do our Old Town Square. Step 1 is to get a surface down, and I'm going to go with this Natural Stone 3 from Elgendo 87. And originally I was going to extend it all the way down the roads here, but if you zoom into the paths, they actually kind of have this nice tile pattern there, so I think we can keep that around. For the square though, let's just get the inside of this rectangle here. And we'll cover Mill Street and get rid of these lamps, because in the middle, we definitely want to get like a big fountain or something, a big centerpiece. Yeah, something nice and grand like this large fountain. I think that is aligned. We'll definitely outline everything with benches, but I love it when I see a big market going on in like a European town square. So let's line the this side, the length of it, with some vending booths. And then, of course, we need plenty of places to sit along the little market here. So we'll do some surrounding the booths here, but then we'll get more shops along Rue de la Guerre and Cobbler Street, which maybe I wish we could name just like a loop right here, but alas, we cannot. I digress. Let's get some shops along the perimeter here with their own dedicated seating and just make this look a little nicer. Alright, I think this is a good start to the town square, despite this truck about to plow through our seating area there. But got this nice little market with the eating area fenced off, all these little bistros by the corners here. And I mean, despite that truck destroying it, I love in Paris how you have seats side by side like this, both facing out, so the partners are sitting next to each other instead of across from each other. You don't really see that in America. So I wanted to get a little taste of Paris in here. But one glaring issue, I think, is that these buildings are all level 1, and already they're kind of dwarfing the church, which is supposed to be the focal point. You know, nothing should be higher than the Lord. So I think we need a redo on this. What we're going to do is, I've been playing around with some static ploppables, and I think if we use the German elementary school extension, we can get something a little more grand. So let's delete the current configuration. And we're going to go to our static ploppables education tab, and it's this, yeah, German elementary school extension wing. So that's like the length of the church, but then on either side you have these things, I think they're called transepts, like buildings poking out. And for that, we're going to use a combination of some UK primary school extensions. Now, they don't have to be symmetrical, and we're going to use that to our advantage because these unfortunately don't have windows on either side. So we're going to get this extension, this extra classroom on this side, so these windows poke out. And then we're going to use this one on the other side. Okay, so it's not perfect. They got slightly different dimensions, but I don't mind these little outcroppings of roof patterns there. Sometimes you'll see that. To make this side, this blank wall a little more embellished, let's get this wall fountain. Let's do this one. It's a little too modern looking. We'll go for the classic look. Alright, so far so good. Now we're going to get that mausoleum back, but we're going to push it back into the building a little bit more because I don't really want the white stone facade poking out from this. Looks a little weird, but I do want the steps leading up to this window to make it look like a door. Okay, I think that's the best I'm going to be able to do to get the staircase centered, but got a little bit of it poking out on either side. That's okay. More on this side, so I wonder if the mausoleum's a little off balance, but I think that's fine for now. So let's get that steeple back. And that was just a regular old chimney. Is this what the steeple is? I forget. I think this is the steeple. The thing where the bell tower is? I don't know. As you can tell, I'm not very religious. Okay, unfortunately I can't color this little gray slab beneath it, but I think that looks a ton more regal than the little rinky-dinky church we had before, so more fitting for our old city center here. I think, let's move this fountain down a little bit though. Okay, and we're hitting play, and nice. Everything's still looking good. If y'all have any ideas of how to make this a little more embellished, yeah, let me know in the comments. Definitely want a good grand old church. So with the initial town center complete and residential demand actually back in full, I want to zone a few factories and get some jobs for all the people that are going to rush to the old city once we complete the remaining blocks. So we had a farm over here, and if we take a look at our production, we are actually at a vegetable deficit, which is surprising because I feel like we have plenty of vegetable farms here. But let's go to this one right here, and this is fertile land, so we can plop it right down here. We'll leave 2 blocks deep there for more houses or offices. We also have some fertile land over here. Yep, right underneath this surface. So let's turn this into a vegetable farm as well and get a lane going off of Hyacinth. Ooh, that's a lovely name. This is pretty steep terrain, so maybe instead let's come off from here. We'll get a couple of clean factories here. I'm turning off colors once and for all. We'll get a couple of clean factories by our little farming area right here. And then also by Dewkirk, I think. Although I'm pretty sure I'm going to redo this part of the road network later on so we can have some nice vineyards up in the hills here. But for now, we need the jobs. And I'm focusing on factories. I guess we don't need the clean version over here because most of our population is uneducated. If we take a look at InfoLoom, we go to workforce. It takes a second to load. There you go. Poorly educated and educated makes up the bulk of our workforce here. What is that, like 80%? So we'll stick with factories for now. But once we have enough money, we'll definitely get a high school and get some more educated citizens. And we are still at a vegetable deficit, pretty hefty, more than we're actually producing. So we have a little bit more fertile land right in the sliver here. So let's extend one more vegetable farm out there to the creek. And yes, these farm roads are curvy. I think I'm okay with that for now. Once we actually extend the city that way, we'll get more jagged roads like this. Okay, so I've let the simulation run for a little bit. We're still making money. That's good. Our unemployment is still horrendous, but a lot better than it was before. I think we started at 43%, so growth mindset. But now we're ready to fill in the remaining blocks here. Around the town square, I'm thinking mixed use and medium residential. I might break up these super blocks with a few more alleys as well. And then on this side of Old Boatman's Road will be low density residential, I think. Across the canal, I'm going to use static ploppables of these Eastern European commercial assets. But with office modular zoning blocks inside them, since we don't have any demand for commercial, we do for office. Unfortunately, we don't have any old looking assets for office buildings. We're stuck with this modern variety. So for aesthetics reasons, I'm going to go with the modular zoning blocks. And then might turn this into a nice little park plaza. Second guessing having this bridge here feels like one too many, but that'll be in the small details. Then if and when demand bounces back, I'm going to shift over the train track so it's more in between equally Hillside Street and Old Boatman's Road. And so we have zoning opportunities on this side of the street here, make it seem a little more full for New Amsterdam. But yeah, that is the plan. So with that out of the way, let's get to zoning. Yeah, let's get rid of the French buildings. So I did say I was going to tear up half the city this episode. I just didn't think I would be doing it twice, but no more French Goebbels apart from a few historical buildings. So we still have Maison Bellerive. This is actually a signature building that I totally cheated and plopped down. Figured, maybe some French business owner came here and said, I'm going to buy this corner and get a little taste of home. And then we have the Red Goose, the wine shop, but I changed this for a French asset that has this kind of red tinted roof, so it matches the vibe a little more. And then, of course, we have some signature buildings that not every region pack has every signature building, so we our hands are a little tied there. And I also think the French low rent stuff is fine to use, but everything else, I think this just makes a little more sense aesthetic-wise. The white roofs in particular really stood out too much, I think. So even though we're still mixing and matching a little bit, I think this makes a little more sense. But apart from that, I did break up some of these super blocks just because a lot of people have said like they really filled every nook and cranny when they were building old European cities, and even now we still have some empty space that we should probably fill in, but I didn't want just giant courtyards, and this is a little guilty of that. Maybe I should break up these blocks as well, but really tried to fill everything in. Obviously the splicing is not perfect, but I think, from afar this is looking fine. Got more factories along the railway corridor since that's kind of polluting, kind of noisy. Figured good place for factories, and more French low rent along Old Boatman's Road there. Over here, primarily low density residential, but I acknowledge that pretty soon this is going to upzone into medium density stuff, so it kind of matches the vibe of the rest of the old city. I just don't want to go for all medium or high density stuff all at once. Want some growth here. And then over here we have static ploppables with the office modular zoning block mod, since I had exhausted all commercial demand. But speaking of, let's also get one of these in our church, so we have some activity going through the front door. Make sure they don't walk through the fountain. And just to be safe, I don't know if this works, and I'm not sure if it's ever worked, but let's make this a hangout area. Maybe we'll see a little bit more activity around the square then. Now before we hit level 6, which is any second now, a lot of people suggested kind of downgrading High Street because even the main avenues in old European cities were narrower than this. Now, I'm not going to actually make this narrow because then we have to move all the buildings back and that'd be a pain, but instead, let's downgrade this to 2 lanes and make these sidewalks a lot wider. And for that, I've actually built a road builder road, so not 4 lane, 2 lane wide sidewalks. I got to rename that. But let's just replace this all the way through there and through the city center. And let's do the same for this stretch of Elm Street. I think over here, this we can actually downgrade to 2 lanes for now. I'll deal with those surfaces in a second. Same for maybe this side of Elm Street. We do not need this to be 4 lanes when it goes to nowhere. And for the trees, I think let's get something with a little more oomph. I'm gonna go to our vegetation tab. Let's do chestnuts. And so if you want to replace trees, just hit this snap to roads option. And it will not let me select the other side. What's going on? Okay, those will grow and kind of fill in the space, but I think that looks a little better. Even though it's still pretty wide, at least it maximizes like pedestrian walkability. And there we go, finally, milestone 6. So a nice cash infusion, but honestly, apart from this awesome signature building, that is pretty much it. I'm not going to use any of these policies just yet. But with that extra money, I think it's time we make our biggest future-facing investment, and that is to finally get a high school so we can have a more educated population to take advantage of all the office blocks that we kind of plop down. However, we cannot afford the German high school yet, which is the one I want. I want to do like a little X-Men Academy here by the lake in New Amsterdam. So let's take out a small loan. Just to be safe, let's get a little bit of a buffer. 150,000 ought to do it. Yeah, let's have it facing the water here, and then we'll get some parking behind it since there's no built-in parking here, and maybe like some faculty or something by the railroad there. Sweet, all connected up, and then let's flatten the land a little bit behind it. And by a little bit, I mean, let's flatten it. I'm going to use this road builder road with a custom alley that has two-way parking, or two-way directions and parking. All right, sweet. And then let's get a little bit of, I don't know, faculty housing if you want to call it that, but I'm going to try the European, like the base European medium density housing, just so we get a little more asset variety. And I think this goes a little bit better with our existing assets than if we had gone with the French route. And we'll separate them with a small parking lot from the factories. Throw them a bone. All right, before I forget, we got to assign our high school to everything. And I always forget you can click and drag to just select all of our districts here. And to make this a little nicer, we got an open plot of land here. Let's just get a small pocket park. Maybe one day we can do something a little more custom, get like a rowing facility there. But for now, let's just do this small, tiny city park. Lovely. And thankfully, we are still making money, although our budget did drop with the wages and the service upkeep there, but looks like we are still in a good position. So I think that is a good place to end it. We did a lot today, even if it wasn't the longest episode. We basically rebuilt half the city, so thanks for sticking in there. Not that we were anywhere near complete. So I want to acknowledge the elephant in the room. We need public transportation. I totally want to get a bunch of trams going on High Street. Hopefully this road builder configuration can support trams and won't look wonky, but we just don't have the money for it right now. Once this gets a little higher, we have more of a buffer to place down our depot, then I'll feel comfortable doing that. I'm also wondering if this part of the canal should be kinked to look more like the Amsterdam canals. That seems like a lot of work right now though, so I don't know if I want to tackle that. Psych, just kidding. After looking at photos of Amsterdam, I definitely wanted to make this less curvy and more kinked like their canal system, which I believe is like a UNESCO World Heritage Site, but also added one more bridge to connect to the Painter Steps and broke up this super block, kind of like what we did with the old city down there. But that, I promise, is the end of the episode. So as always, if you all have other feedback or ideas of where our tram system should go, let me know in the comments. Thank you all for leading me to this. Again, hopefully you think this is an improvement. I think it's an improvement. And if not, well, we got our work cut out for us. So until next time, I hope you all have a good one. Bye.